Welcome to the Whole Marketer podcast, where we look at the holistic skills and behaviours, the technical skills, soft and human, leadership skills, and personal understanding that marketers need to grow the brands and businesses of tomorrow. I'm Abby Dixon, your host, author and founder of The Whole Marketer, and director of our marketing capability and transformation consultancy, where we work with passionate marketing leaders to provide the clarity, support, empowerment, and inspiration needed to build successful and fulfilled marketing teams. Hello and welcome to the Whole Marketer podcast. Today's podcast is a technical episode. It's marketing effectiveness. And shortly we'll welcome today's guest, Sorin, onto the podcast. But before we do, let me tell you why I believe it's so important that we're talking about marketing effectiveness. Marketing effectiveness continues to be a key capability gap within our profession. If we truly want marketing to lead the long-term commercial agenda, then demonstrating the effectiveness of our investment is the first step towards this. Ideally, marketers would be having full commercial accountability, but I appreciate this isn't the case for many marketers. And therefore, we are on a journey to gaining this. And our first step to gaining this is to make sure that we can demonstrate that our investment is not a cost and that the investment that we are making is delivering effectiveness on a strategic, tactical, and campaign level, and ultimately ladders up to deliver profitable growth in the short and the long term. Today's guest is Sorin Patilinet. He is the global marketing executive and author of the best-selling marketing effectiveness book, Applying Marketing Science for Brand Growth, and is one of the leading voices in making marketing more accountable and impactful. With 20 years' experience in global roles at Mars and currently at PepsiCo, Sorin has helped shape how some of the world's most iconic brands are measured. Today, he's focused on demystifying marketing effectiveness and sparking smarter conversations in the boardroom. Sorin lives in Brussels, Belgium, loves Liverpool FC, airplanes, and alternative rock music. Sorin, welcome to the Whole Marketer podcast.
Thank you for having me. Such a nice intro. It's a true honor to be on this podcast. I've been listening to a few episodes, and I can't believe that I'm actually a guest now. So thank you very much for the invite.
You're very welcome, and thank you for making the time. I've read your book, which I did read on my holiday. As I always joke, marketing geek, hashtag sorry, not sorry. So I will happily be reading a marketing effectiveness book poolside. So as you've listened to some of our podcast episodes, you know that we always start with a big juicy question. And today's big juicy question is, what is marketing effectiveness to you?
Marketing effectiveness is my passion. Marketing effectiveness is the topic that I dedicated the last 15 years of my career to understand it better. And I still haven't figured it out 100%. But if I had to summarize it in a short answer, marketing effectiveness is a holistic understanding of the effect of everything that we do as marketeers on the results of our business. It's purely a function of what we put in versus the results that we get. And I think it's often misunderstood. It's often simplified. It's often considered as ROI or creative excellence. But it's much, much more than that. Again, my first word was holistic. It's about everything that we do and we should do as marketers to have a better result for our brands and our companies.
I love that definition, and a holistic view of everything that we do and how we're demonstrating the effectiveness. And I love that you clarified there that it's not ROI and it's not creative excellence, because I believe exactly the same. In fact, I did a series of posts a little while ago, which was about misconstrued terminology, and ROI and KPIs was one that I also covered. So it's great to hear that you feel the same. So that holistic view is something that you have spent, as you said, and focused on in the last 10 years in your career. You wrote a book. So much so passionate about it that you wrote a book on marketing effectiveness. There it is. Applying Marketing Science to Growth. Tell us what drove you to write the book. What was the inspiration behind it?
I don't remember exactly how I came up with the idea, but I was reflecting a lot on the abundance of knowledge that we have access to these days. We have amazing academics that fight on various stages and share with us their ideas, from Mark to Byron and Kuhn and many, many others. We have great work done by research organizations. We have great work done by agencies and esteemed authors that are part of those agencies. But somehow I felt there was a missing voice in that conversation, and that was the voice of the brand, the voice of the advertiser. And sneakily, I tried to fit myself into that space because I believe that brand perspective is important. I was lucky enough to work with Aaron Bas in my time at Mars for over 15 years, very, very closely to them. And I understood exactly the dynamics between their work and the brands. And you could replace Aaron Bas with any other like Oxford or any other university that does research. They need us. They need the brands because we have the data. They have the scientific rigor. They have the ability to synthesize that information. They can take us to places where we could not get, but they don't have the data. That's what, from a brand perspective, we were lucky to have. And that's what we gave us the edge on applying principles of how brands grow, but also challenging those principles with the data that we have. So as I was always telling them, scientific rigor works up to a certain point. When something hits the fan, you need to make the best use of your time and your budget. And sometimes that means reducing a little bit the confidence in your results, getting a smaller sample size, but still being true to your principles. So again, I was lucky to be exposed to that work and to drive that work. And I felt that this brand perspective it can bust some myths around marketing effectiveness and can provide someone that starts in marketing or someone that starts in marketing measurement a boost in their career. So I still don't know exactly what's the target of my book. I'm juggling between senior leaders that want to have a complete overview of marketing effectiveness, which the book delivers on. But if I have to be true to myself, this is for those of us that have started in a marketing role and want to get ahead of their competitors by absorbing the knowledge that I've learned over 15 years.
Yeah, I really love that you wanted to bring a brand perspective, the perspective from the marketer who is actually investing in those conditions. And as you said, when the proverbial hits the fan, when those market conditions, have a variety of different impacts and realities faced with them, what do we do?
Yeah, and not even those moments. I mean, we've onboarded Mars as an organization into the laws of growth or how brands grow in 2010, I think, 2011. As time went by, people started to get bored of those laws. So even if they are true and they cannot be changed, you need to constantly bring them up to bring something new. You constantly need to adapt them to the culture of the organization. So that kind of perspective is much more about than publishing a paper and then going ahead with it for 10 years. It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The relevancy in the marketplace with the changing dynamics and changing channels and mix and all of those things and changing consumers. Yeah, you're right. You can't just write a paper and go, that's it, Merry Christmas, we're done. It's a constant work in progress. And I love that you've done it from a data perspective. And it makes a lot more sense because someone who's read the book, and I do encourage others that want to learn more about the holistic view of all the different things that you can measure as a marketer to buy the book and have a good read or leave it on your desk as a reference guide. Is that the first few chapters you outline those principles, like here's how I make strategic choices, here's how design thinking's happen, here's the Byron Sharp principles, because you're right, they were created how many years ago, but I think some people don't understand the context of what the studies were and how their impact on the kind of foundational thinking behind it before you get into how to set those KPIs. So you wanted to give this brand perspective and to think holistically. And the reason I wanted to get you on the podcast, Sorin, was because I personally love marketing effectiveness. It's a little bit like my guilty pleasure. Um, I actually taught measurement and effectiveness on the CIM postgrad qualification for 6 years because it was the module almost that no one else wanted to teach. And I was like, what? Give it to
You
me.
never asked me to teach it.
Well, there you go. I'll put you in touch. It was almost the module that no one else wanted to teach, but I did because I think it's absolutely fundamental to demonstrate why the work we do is so important as marketers. at strategic, tactical, campaign level, delivering the commercial goal and much, much more. But as a profession, I'm still seeing capability gaps. I'm seeing an increase in marketers kind of measuring maybe channel performance, or they're measuring, as we've become more digital with performance marketing, they've got the metrics of those or the analytics of those, but not necessarily all channels or all of our mix activities or all of how those ladder into our strategic choices and delivering into our commercial goals and much, much more. So we end up having marketers that aren't always able to consistently set those KPIs at a commercial, strategic, tactical level, and maybe don't have the data, working in organizations where they have the data or know what data to commission in order to have the understanding to create the interdependencies. What do you believe is the biggest barrier to marketers being able to really embrace the full potential of marketing effectiveness as a skill?
I always think that the barrier is in the mindset. I always play with this idea that we are probably spending too much time discussing about the tools
Mm-hmm.
rather than the decisions that those tools would enable us. I think if we start from which decisions are driving the biggest impact on the top line and the bottom line, we would probably not investigate that much tool A versus tool B, but we will focus on maybe another data set. I think we are also slaves to the data availability and the data that is being sold to us by platforms, by panel providers. And I think that approaching with here is the data, what can we do with this data is completely wrong. I think we should go all the way to the end. We should think about what are the decisions that we're making here and then look for the data that we need to actually make those decisions better. And then again, we speak too much about tools and processes rather than how do you move an internal culture to actually make decisions on that data. Just because you've run an MMM and just because you've selected the best provider and it passes all your tests doesn't mean anything. I mean, you still have a lot of work to do inside your organization to sell that idea, to gain the trust, to basically embed it into the processes that you have. And I find that piece is often overlooked, especially maybe it's often overlooked in the external discourse on podcasts, on LinkedIn, and so on, where we talk more about tools and data. If you want to win, that's where you need to focus on adapting the method to your organization's decision culture.
I loved what you said there around data availability, because I see the same. I see this is what we buy into, and therefore this is what it will tell us, as opposed to what do I need to know and how do these interlink with the decisions that we've made based on what we're tactically delivering, the strategic choices that we've set out to make, and then the commercial benefit. I'm also not seeing the link being kind of articulated in that way, or the understanding, but very much reporting on what they've always reported on, or even just focus on kind of market performance, monthly market performance. So your market share metrics and maybe your volume and where you are against versus forecast, maybe quarterly usage data at best, and then any other analytics if they do put it in that dashboard, but not, as you said on the very first of the podcast, that holistic view that they need to see from all the activities they're doing and the choices they've made in the commercial delivery and being able to demonstrate that. And you're right, it's almost if we could flip the mindset to go, what is it that you need to understand, or what is it you need to demonstrate? How can we get to a better place from doing that?
With everyone I worked with, and in every company that I was lucky to work, I've always advised on really listing all the decisions that you can make to improve your business and then ranking them in terms of the impact they have on your final dollars. That gives you the focus. And I'm 100% sure that in most companies, deciding what's the frequency for your Instagram stories is not one of your number 1, 2, 3 decisions. Usually those are what's the right availability level around distribution, what's the right price elasticity for my brand, and how can I push my brand to different price levels, what's the effectiveness of the creative message for your biggest platforms that you have. But we without wanting to sound like dismissive of the platforms, we're getting a lot of data from those platforms and we tend to optimize those kind of executions, but maybe those are not the ones that are actually driving your total outcomes for the brand, and rank them and then start with the first and then go down on your ranking, because your energy is finite. You can't just do everything. And of course, you want to do the most impactful work.
I love that as a piece of advice around what are those key questions that you need answering and then thinking from it from that perspective. And you mentioned there around actually your distribution or your pricing strategy being something that you really need to be able to have a better oversight for to have commercial impact. In the book, you wrote and talked about just that, which got me excited. As I said earlier, hashtag marketing geeks, sorry, not sorry. So I see that a lot of marketing teams are still seen as a support function. And we're still on this journey to positioning marketing as the one that leads longer term commercial agenda and the one that is the growth agenda of the business. But in the chapter Product and Pricing Effectiveness, you outline that pricing effect is the link between marketing and the boardroom. And we hear so often how marketing is still struggling to gain credibility in the boardroom. Can you share more about why you think this is the case and what advice you would give?
I think brand or marketing has lost the voice in the boardroom because marketers go to the boardroom with social media completion rates and engagements and brand consideration metrics sourced from a questionnaire that maybe some bots have taken rather than your target consumer. So I'm exaggerating here, but there's no other conversation that happens in the boardroom more important than what's my customer acquisition cost, what's the ability for my brand to find the right price that would generate the optimal profit for my business, and what should I do next in order to generate value for my shareholders and stakeholders at the same time. So none of those questions get answered by engagement rates and likes and shares, unfortunately. So we need to shift to that conversation. Now, I'm not an expert in pricing. I mean, I'm not an expert in pricing because in consumer packaged goods, there is a trend of hyper specialization in the marketing function, of giving up important capabilities to other departments. We've given up to R&D, product innovation. We've given up pricing to the finance department. And slowly, we're left with communication, with advertising. And maybe that's the reason why we only talk about media and creative, because that's what we do in large organizations. I'm sure it's slightly different in startups and smaller organizations where basically the resources are not there. But as a brand manager, any brand manager that respects herself or himself should have a view and an input into the pricing of its brand, irrespective if that pricing is set by the retail partners, by the finance department. I think not being part of that conversation is the reason why we're not in many boardrooms. In the book, I'm giving some ideas of how can you get inside that conversation. By what are some metrics that we need to question, what is some research that we can do around pricing, because I believe that pricing could generate more benefit for the organization than advertising can. And I know that's a very hard stance there, but looking at everything that happens around us post-COVID, we've seen how big the upswing in pricing can be, both up and also down. When you factor in inflation, when you factor in the various strategies that were activated in different categories over the last years. So simply ignoring pricing is not a good idea. And the same with distribution.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's an interesting viewpoint that you said there about we've given it up. And I think, have we given it up or has it been taken from us? And as you said there, it's not the same in every organization, because I think some organizations, marketers do have full P&L responsibility. They are, predicting the forecasting of the volumes, they are setting the pricing, they are owning that kind of turnover line in the P&L and are able to have the price elasticity understanding about kind of the, volume and demand and all the rest of it, or even looking at setting that pricing against brand positioning and indexing and so on. But I think you're right. For those that have given it up, the impact is going to affect how you're perceived, as a function, if you will, and at the board level for sure.
I think that's a good point. I don't know if we've given it up or not, but I can definitely think we can bring it back into our remit, because if you think about it, no CFO will come up with the idea to launch a brand extension at a higher price point that's a bit more premium, that communicates something different but still uses the cues of the main brand. So that's the role of marketing. So, and that's a pricing game. I mean, launching a sub range at the premium level is a marketing activity. So maybe we've given up, but I think we should look back at it.
I agree. Definitely needs to come back into the fold if it's not in your fold, for those that are listening. So you mentioned there that most marketing teams are still holding on to communication. I think often gets another thing that gets misconstrued is the difference between effectiveness and efficiencies, or ROI versus KPIs, and the need to measure creative effectiveness to make sure that what we're investing behind is going to be impactful. And you wrote in your book outlining the difference between effectiveness and efficiencies, which I love, to stop it being misconstrued. I'd love for you to share more around what you believe to be important when measuring creative effectiveness and efficiencies.
So this is my favorite topic in the marketing book. It's the topic I dedicated the largest part of my marketing effectiveness role. Surprisingly, still there are misunderstandings about even those two terms that you mentioned, like effectiveness and efficiency. Now, you can easily ask Claude or ChatGPT to define them, and you will find the answer right there. But I like to think in formulas, and if you remember one formula from today, I mean, efficiency is the division of effectiveness by cost. ROI is how much you've driven effectiveness divided by how much you paid for that activation. The reason why I've driven a culture of effectiveness and not a culture of efficiency is very simple. If you increase the numerator of that fraction, you will solve for efficiency as well, because at the same cost, growing effectiveness will get you a better efficiency. But if you focus on efficiency, then you can go on a wrong path, thinking that you could improve efficiency by reducing the cost. And that's a really hurtful move for your brand, especially in the long term. In most communication channels, the first dollars that you spend are giving you the highest ROI. There is a diminishing return curve. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just to reduce investment to show a better ROI figure. Now, that gives you some room to breathe in the short term, but it penalizes you for the long term. So knowing how to push effectiveness is a far better and more productive path than finding ways to play with cost to drive efficiency. That's one of the things that I highlight in the book as well. Now, and then we go into complications about what types of ROI are you measuring? Are you measuring profit ROI? Are you measuring sales ROI? Are you measuring ROAS? I think the confusions don't stop there, but a short check in my book or a short prompt in any AI tool will get you the answer very fast.
And what's the answer? What's the answer for people that are going, yes, Sorin, I want to be able to demonstrate effectiveness? What are those key measures that you would recommend that I need to start understanding more about and adopting?
I'm very biased around what's a measure of creative effectiveness. And to me, there's only one measure of creative effectiveness, and that's the sales outcome of that creative. I've been championing this thinking for years, and it's hard for me to change my mind about it. Now, I do think that advertising has to play both a short-term role, but also a long-term role of building the brand. We are in the business of building brands for the long term. However, I have still to come across a campaign or like an execution that has no impact in the short term, but somehow magically builds something 2 years along the line. So because I haven't come up with an example of that, I tend to say that if you don't have an impact in the short term on sales, there's something not right. And therefore you should change your ad, to go back to the previous executed ad. Because if you have a short-term impact on sale today, you will have more chances of having a long-term impact on your equity along the way. So It's simplistic. It's not dualistic like many would start to think. But I have this idea that solving for sales will get you a solve for equity in the long run as well.
And on that point around short-term and long-term gains, I often don't see like a time period that's allocated for the short and allocated for the long when people are measuring against. Do you see the same?
Depends. I think the mindset should be there. I think the point that Les and Peter had made in their famous The Long and Short of It was often misunderstood, and I'm trying to explain that in the book. I don't think they were actually mentioning, they were only talking about your TV ad. And if your TV ad should be a brand equity ad and your TV ad should be a drive to purchase promo ad. I think they were referencing the whole marketing mix. There are some channels that are skewed towards the short. There are some channels that are skewed towards the long. An example is a promo, an in-store promo. That's a purely short-term sales activation that has very little impact or very little positive impact in the long-term equity of your brand. If worse, it can have a negative impact on the equity of your brand. While there are other channels like a partnership or a sponsoring that in theory doesn't have a short-term impact, but it builds the brand for the long term. So I think that when they were talking about the famous 60-40% ratio, they were mostly talking about the way you allocate between channels rather than within a TV ad, how many ads should be equity and how many ads should be go to Tesco and buy this product today because it's 3 for 2. So
Yeah.
that's how I think about that. We like to think of short as in campaign and long anything that's 1 year plus.
And therefore we need to have the data sources and the frequency to allow us to
Yeah, because every business is different. I mean, it's very, I realized this while writing the book that it's incredibly hard to come up with patterns that work for the services, hotel industries, the airlines, and the carbonated soft drinks or potato chips snacks. So we have different ways of accessing our data. We have different ways of, we have a different frequency of purchase within our categories. And all those should be accounted for when you think about marketing effectiveness.
Definitely. I think defining that time frame also helps when it then comes to doing a short and a long-term ROI calculation as well. So you can look at the predicted net profit sales to calculate that. But I see that there isn't those kind of there's those investment principles that you mentioned there, the 60-40, rational, emotional, long and short for the allocation, but actually what's that delivered when it comes to ROI? They don't always have a consistent time period. And so therefore you're not comparing apples with apples, which is why I wanted to ask you that question. Did you know that The Whole Marketer is not only a podcast and book, but also a marketing capability and transformation consultancy with trusted partners to many leading household brands, empowering their marketers with the holistic skills and behaviours through our training courses, workshops and leadership programs, providing support and fulfilment through coaching, mentoring and our trusted advisor work, and providing inspiration through our talks and keynotes. We work with passionate marketing leaders, helping them define and gain that all-important clarity through vision setting and strategy development. Through our capability consultancy, we define the future role of marketing, define the required skills and behaviours, the ways of working, infrastructure, processes and much, much more to ensure your team are able to deliver against that future role aspiration. We partner with you through each stage of the transformation journey to step change not only your team's capabilities, but also to empower those marketeers in your care to lead that long-term commercial agenda and deliver on the true potential of marketing. So if you're a passionate marketer or marketing leader who wants to develop themselves and the marketeers in their care holistically to help them not only be successful in what they do, but also fulfilled, then we're here to help. Find out more at thewholemarketer.com. Right, let's get back to that conversation. We just talked there around what's the right time period, what's the right level of allocation. And what's also really important is that once you have, as you mentioned earlier, defined those key things that you need to understand that are going to drive the ultimate commercial success and the profit, that we have the right data sources or data availability, as you said. So we can't measure effectiveness without the right data sources. And in order to have those right data sources, we need the investment and the resource to collate and analyze. What advice would you give to marketers that are listening going, yes, that is a barrier for me. what could I do differently?
Again, in the spirit of thinking decisions first and not data first, I would advise anyone to first learn how your business is making money. To be an effective marketer, you need to understand how your company sells and how your company drives profit. And maybe that's a channel conversation, maybe that's a route to market conversation, maybe that's a sub brand conversation. But understanding where most of your money are made could guide your data collection. We fear that we live in a world where data is unlimited and the quality of the data is not that great. Again, I don't know what works for every industry. I think everybody in their organizations know better than me what's the quality of their data, but I think there are a couple of ways data could be enhanced these days. I've been playing since the beginning with synthetic data sets, which when handled with care could enhance the data that gets embedded into your models. Now, AI has been a big unlocker, not where most people think about in the method, but in the simple things. For example, at PepsiCo, we have identified better ways to measure the impact of our sponsoring activities in sports, because AI now can watch all your feeds and can precisely tell you how many seconds, how big was your logo on the shirt of that footballer, and could convert that into amazing input data for your market mix model. So I think for me it's always surprises when I find things like this, that AI is not that powerhouse that solves what we think it solves, but it definitely sits somewhere in the back of most of our also research activities. That's when it comes to data. And I think when it comes to method, I was a big fan of experimentation, and I am still a big fan of experimentation. I introduced in the book a pyramid of quality versus complexity when it comes to your measurement opportunities. And at the top of that pyramid is experimentation. That's where we should try to get to, because that's the only causal way to define that input has an impact in the business. And this is where I think the challenges with data quality come, especially when your brand is not owning the sales data, like in the case of consumer packaged goods. But I think there are smart ways to push experimentation and to create a learning agenda that drives you the most out of your that data.
So using AI to help with the analysis and interpretation and looking at the quality, what other pieces of advice would you give to those that are trying to not only set the right KPIs, but also trying to make sure that they've got the data and processes to be able to measure against them?
Another advice that would be a bit weird, I would say, is to not change. We tend to do a great work at identifying the hundreds KPI that we should be looking at, selecting the 20 ones that are the most important, creating a dashboard, presenting that dashboard, and then immediately in version 2, adding 3 more metrics or changing a little bit something. And we're doing that with good reasons. I mean, we're thinking that this should be an iterative process and our stakeholders should get the best view on our performance as possible. But we should probably stop for a while and then focus on what matters and never change that matters. I've measured sales impact of advertising in the same way at Mars for 14 years. We've never changed the method. We've changed the data partners. We've changed the way, the model inside the analysis, but the output to the business was exactly the same. You got a star rating that gave you the confidence to continue to invest in that creative or to stop that creative. And that was what made the practice very successful. The ability to continuously speak the same language, even if data changes and data improves over time. So don't get bored of your dashboard so fast. Give it time. Give it time for the organization to get used to it. And don't assume that just because you've spent so much time building that dashboard, the others on the other side of the screen or the meeting room have seen it so many times like you did. It's similar to add wear out, I would say. Don't change a winning horse.
Yeah, so don't change that methodology. And I suppose I was listening to you, I was thinking, and every time you change it, there's going to be a different piece of education that you're going to need to do internally to allow them to understand why you've changed it, what it's telling us, what actions that we recommend taking as a result of what it's telling us. Whereas, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, you've got a big enough job as it is to gain internal buy-in. Almost changing that is going to make that more difficult for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's why instead of discussing decisions and what we do next in our debriefs, we tend to always talk about the method and the slight changes of the method and how can we get marginally better at deploying a certain version of MMM. And between you and me, because I don't think anyone else is listening to us right now, I don't think that your CMO or your CFO cares which type of MMM are you using. I think she or he cares that you're providing a consistent input for their decision and that you are also providing the options and you're discussing with them what are those options. So it's much more human than simply continuously selling the marginal improvements of the method.
Definitely. And that kind of education piece that happens and kind of demonstrating that you have got the rigor behind what you're choosing to invest in and why, and the confidence behind that so that you can then model that into commercial return, which is the bit that they probably will care a lot more about.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So setting KPIs. So people are listening going, yep, we need to get better at setting the right KPIs. It feels to me like the natural place to do that of setting the right KPIs would be as part of strategic planning process. So for someone who's about to embark on that process and they're about to develop their dashboard, what advice would you give them?
I would go back to something I said in the beginning. I would want them to find the flywheel of their organization or their brand. I would like them to think holistically about what drives brand performance and not just focus on one element of that framework. I'd like to think that yes, this is done as strategy planning, but it includes pricing, it includes product, it includes distribution, it includes media, it includes creative, it even includes the ROI of your research and the quality of the research that you do. And then across, and maybe depending on the business model, it has other elements that come into play. Then you need to think what are those metrics that could become KPIs, because metrics are everywhere. KPIs are those metrics that are linked with the outcome that you desire, which is for most brands that either penetration or sales increase or market share increase. What are the KPIs that can get you there? And maybe it's increase in weighted distribution, maybe it's price elasticity, maybe it's percentage of dollars spent on effective creative, maybe it's media ROI. I think that it's a quite holistic process, but find that flywheel and then start to color code it, and then tackle the reds and keep looking for the greens. And I would say it's easy, but I think it also depends on the level of confidence that your organization has in making data-driven decisions. I've seen examples where you build amazing KPIs, amazing systems of measurement, but half of the decisions are not made with data. So at the end of the day, you need to find out how the company makes decisions and then decide how much you invest in data-driven marketing. And there's a spectrum.
There is a spectrum. And I know it varies from one organization to another. And as you said, it also depends on the culture of are they making data driven decisions based on robust, factual, quantitative data? Or are they impulsively making decisions based on kind of emotional gut feel? And maybe somewhere in between is the winning combination.
I don't know if making 100% data decisions is the right way. It feels like a dystopian future where we are no longer bringing anything to the party. And maybe that's a potential future, but I'd love to think that there's still a mix of art and science involved in all this effectiveness work.
Me too. Me too. Because at the end of the day, we're humans connecting with humans, right? I think when it comes to measurement, the numbers tell us. But I think when it comes to making decisions, there is still that level of human intuition that is so important. So, Soren, thank you so much for everything you've shared so far on what you believe it takes to really be able to embrace an effectiveness culture, from having the right data sources, having the right mindset, the way in which we set those based on the commercial holistic view that we need to adopt, and also some of the challenges and barriers and the misconstrued terminology that we have within the profession. And for those that are listening that want more clarity on some of those definitions that get bandied around our profession, then please do go and grab a copy of Soren's new book. We've come to a point in the podcast where we always ask the following question, Soren, which is, what one piece of advice would you give to marketers of tomorrow?
I think most people these days would answer the obvious, find out what AI can help you with. Of course, I cannot put AI out of my thinking, but a bit of a counter idea would be to really look inside your organization and find what hasn't changed in the last 10 years and start from there, because if it hasn't changed in the last 10 years, there is a chance that it won't change in the last 10 years. So in a world where AI is shocking us every day and the evolution of technology is something we can't keep track with, I think I read somewhere that you need a full-time, you need to resign from your job in order to keep up with AI development as a full-time job. Because we are not able to do that, I would concentrate on what hasn't changed. And what hasn't changed is that we are still mostly selling to humans. We're still convincing humans to make decisions using the power of creativity, using emotions. We're still discussing about attention. We're still trying to change people's minds. And the list can go on. And the list depends on your brand and your business and your organization. But find out what hasn't changed in the last 10 years, and you would be surprised where you can focus next.
That's a great piece of advice. And thank you again for your time on today's podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into the Whole Marketer podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do like, follow and share with others in our marketing community so that we can create a wave of whole marketers who are successful, fulfilled in their careers and lives as a whole. To further inspire you on latest thinking, marketing approaches and technical skills, we have plenty of free resources on our website. To download these, simply visit the resources page on the Whole Marketer website. Plus, you'll also find a full range of our services that outline how we partner with marketing leaders to build teams of successful and fulfilled marketers who are supported and empowered to grow the brands and businesses of tomorrow, to lead the long-term commercial agenda and deliver on the true potential of marketing.